Today I'm going to show you how to make delicious chocolate molten lava cakes. First we're going to start off with our ganache. You will need half an ounce of butter, 5½ ounces of semi-sweet chocolate chopped, and half a cup of heavy cream. I used baker's chocolate that I found in the supermarket, and I just chopped it up nice and fine. If you need an easy way to measure it, you could look at the chocolate, and there are actually measurements on each little part of the bars. So now I'm going to show you how to chop the chocolate. When chopping chocolate, you want to either use a serrated knife or a chef knife, and you just push firmly down onto the chocolate to cut through it. You want to make this as small as possible so that when we add liquid to it, it melts nice and easily. While I'm chopping my chocolate, I'm going to start to melt slowly my butter and add my cream and bring it up to a simmer. You want to make sure that the temperature is not too high on the stove because we don't want this to come to a full boil or boil over. So I'm just going to stir it a little bit, and then I'm going to let it slowly come to temperature. Meanwhile, I'm going to go back to chopping my chocolate and putting it into a heat-proof bowl. I just want to explain to you what ganache is. Ganache is really a mixture of chocolate and cream. It's used to make truffles and other candies, to fill cakes and pastries. The texture of ganache depends on the ratio of cream to chocolate. The more cream, the more loose or soft the ganache is. The less cream, the harder it will be. So that's why we're able to make truffles for our molten cake, because our ganache is going to be on the firmer side. So now you see that my liquid has come up to a simmer, and I'm going to pour it right over my chocolate, and then I'm going to start to mix it. I'm going to continue stirring this with a whisk. As it starts to cool down, you will notice that it will start to thicken. We just want to stir it vigorously to make sure that it all comes together and that the butter does not separate from the chocolate that we have melted. After I have mixed it well, I'm actually going to put it in the refrigerator for a couple of hours until it is nice and firm. I finished mixing it. I actually transferred it to a new bowl, and now I'm going to put it in the refrigerator until it hardens. The next step is to form them into small balls. Now you can use a teaspoon. I'm using a melon baller. After I cooked this recipe, I decided that I needed to put more chocolate inside of each of the molten cakes. So I'd say about a heaping tablespoon is a better measure for each one of your cakes. If you want to invest in a small portion scoop, about ½ ounce in size would be the proper measurement. That would be a number 50 scooper, which does a little bit more than a tablespoon. So now I'm going to continue to portion my truffles for the center of my molten cakes. I dip the scooper and my spoon in the water that is warm in between each scoop so that it is able to come out more easily of the portion scoop. Now if you wanted to pop these in the refrigerator and then coat them with some cocoa powder and chocolate, you can actually have truffle candies right here. But we're going to continue, put them in the refrigerator, and then we're going to prepare our molten cake. For this recipe, you will need 9 ounces of semi-sweet chocolate chopped and put into a large mixing bowl, 5½ ounces of unsalted butter, 4 eggs that we are going to separate, ½ a cup of cake flour. If you don't have cake flour, you take 1 tablespoon of cornstarch and add enough AP flour to make ½ a cup, 1/3 of a cup of sugar, a pinch of salt, a teaspoon of vanilla extract. So now what we're going to do is we're going to melt our butter. You want to make sure that you melt it slowly and not burn any of the butter while you are doing this. When the butter is completely melted, we are going to actually pour it over our chopped chocolate. This is going to help the chocolate to melt quickly and completely. The reason why it will melt so fast is because we made sure to chop it up as small as we could into tiny pieces so that it doesn't take as much heat to melt them. So we're just going to stir this to help the heat go all the way around the bowl and to come in contact with all of the chocolate. Once I see that it is completely melted, I'm going to stop and I'm going to let it cool, and I'm going to start preparing the rest of the ingredients for my recipe. I'm going to separate my eggs. I'm going to crack my eggs in half, and then what I like to do is I like to rock the yolk back and forth between the shells in order to have the whites drip into the bowl below. Now I'm going to start to whip my egg whites. The first important thing to remember is that when you are whipping egg whites, you want to make sure that there are no egg yolks left behind inside of the egg whites, because otherwise they will not whip up, because the fat from the egg white will prevent that. So what I'm going to do is, while I'm whipping this, as they become more and more frothy, I'm going to add my sugar. I'm going to probably add about 2/3 of the sugar to this part of the recipe, and the other third of the sugar I'm going to leave for my chocolate mixture. It doesn't have to be exact. So I'm going to keep on whisking until my egg whites turn into something called soft peaks. So when I lift the whisk from the egg whites, they stand up a little bit. They're not runny. They hold a little bit on the whisk. So now that my egg whites are whipped, I need to continue with the rest of my recipe rapidly. The chocolate has cooled, and now I'm going to add the rest of my ingredients. I'm going to add my remaining sugar. Then I'm going to add my salt. Normally I would add it with the flour, but I want to make sure that the salt dissolves during this stage. Next, I'm going to add my 4 eggs that I'm just whipping up lightly. Just make sure you get all of the eggs out of the bowl. Combine well. I'm going to add my vanilla extract. And make sure that all these ingredients are combined thoroughly. Now I'm going to add my flour. I want to add my flour and stir it to make sure that there are no lumps inside of this batter. So since the batter is still slightly warm, it's not hot at all, slightly warm, that's going to actually help the flour absorb more of the moisture a little bit faster, and there won't be as many clumps. Once that's well combined, I'm going to get ready for the crucial part of adding my egg whites. So I'm going to take a little bit of this chocolate mixture and add it to my egg whites, as to not shock the egg whites when they're put into a batter that is much more dense. So by adding a little bit of chocolate to the egg whites, it's not going to be in total shock. So now I'm going to add my egg whites to my bowl of chocolate, and I'm going to actually fold the egg whites in. So this is a technique where you take your rubber spatula and you fold the chocolate into the rest of the egg white mixture. The folding technique requires you to carefully scrape the bottom of the bowl and lift it over the egg whites or the aerated mixture. This is not to be done aggressively, as I speed up my camera for you there. Is to be done gently until it's fully combined. Because if you do it too fast, you're going to take the air out of the egg whites, and the egg whites is what's really going to give us the structure of our cakes. So now we are going to prepare the pans for our chocolate molten cakes. I'm going to spray them with a little bit of pan spray, and then I'm going to portion about 2 tablespoons of batter into each of my muffin tins. If you want to use something bigger, you can. Smaller, you can, but you will obviously have to adjust your recipe if you needed a larger quantity. So now I'm going to put 1 small truffle into the middle of each of my cakes. After I have done that, I'm going to cover the cakes with the remaining batter, so about a tablespoon. So I'd say about 3 tablespoons of cake batter are going to go in each one of these cakes. After I have portioned out the remaining cake batter, I'm going to carefully even out and make sure that the truffle is covered before I put them in the oven for baking. This is also important so they bake nice and evenly. I want to make sure that my oven is preheated to 400 degrees before I get to this stage. I'm going to put them in the oven in the center, and I'm going to bake them for about 8 to 10 minutes until they puff up a little bit in the pan. I'm going to let them cool before I take them out of the pan to serve. If you were making them the day before to serve them, you would just pop them in the microwave for about 10 seconds to just warm. Serve with ice cream and whipped cream, and I hope you enjoy this recipe. Don't forget to give us a like, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell icon for notifications for when we upload new videos.